The Lighthouse Keeper's Lie. Chapter 1. The Grey Curtain Rises. The ferry cleaved through water the color of lead, its diesel engine a mournful thrum against the vast, indifferent silence of the sea. Greyhaven Isle emerged from the perpetual mist like a forgotten sentinel, its cliffs a jagged scar against an even grayer sky. Elara Vance gripped the cold railing, the salt spray stinging her face, a sensation both familiar and unwelcome. She was 32, but returning to Greyhaven always stripped years from her, leaving her feeling like the unsure girl who had fled this place a decade ago. She had come back to bury her father, Arthur Vance. The name itself was a weight, a legacy both revered and resented. Arthur Vance, the island's pillar, its savior, its benevolent dictator, philanthropist, businessman, visionary, the man who had modernized the declining fishing village, transforming it into a hub of modest industry, maritime holdings. The irony was not lost on Elara. Her father, the man of the sea, had met his end on land, falling from the treacherous cliff path near the old lighthouse during a sudden violent squall. A cruel twist of fate, or a poetic one, depending on how one viewed the complex, shadowy figure of Arthur Vance. For years, Elara had kept her distance, burying her quiet suspicions about his rigid control and secretive nature beneath layers of polite letters and infrequent strained phone calls. She had allowed the public image of Arthur, the heroic, unwavering force, to eclipse the nagging doubts that had always lurked in the periphery of her childhood memories. Now, those doubts felt like a betrayal, a whisper of dissent even in death. She regretted the chasm that had grown between them, a regret so profound it clawed at her throat. She had, in essence, buried her own suspicions with him when she left, choosing peace of mind over uncomfortable truths. The island's pervasive gloom seemed to amplify her guilt, wrapping around her like a wet shroud. Greyhaven, with its stark beauty and somber stone houses, had a way of holding on to its secrets and its sorrows. Chapter 2. Beneath the Funeral Shroud. The funeral was a spectacle. The entire island turned out, a sea of black umbrellas against a sky that wept a fine, persistent drizzle. Faces, etched with the toil of the sea and the weight of generations, offered their condolences, murmuring platitudes about Arthur's greatness, his generosity. Elara stood beside the freshly dug earth, enveloped by the scent of damp soil and lilies, feeling utterly adrift. Sheriff Thorne, a man whose face held the intricate map of Greyhaven's history, every gale, every tragedy, every quiet triumph, approached her after the last prayer. His uniform, a sturdy dark blue, seemed a part of the island itself. His eyes, though weary, held a sharp intelligence that missed nothing. He offered his condolences, his voice a low rumble, but it was his professional reserve that truly unsettled Elara. "A tragic accident, Elara," he said, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond her shoulder on the churning gray sea. "The path to the old lighthouse, especially in a squall, it's unforgiving." He dismissed her father's death as an unfortunate accident linked to the rough weather, just as the official report stated. Yet Elara noticed a subtle reluctance in his eyes, a flicker of something unsaid that resonated with her own buried unease. She searched his face for more, but Thorne's expression was a fortress. She remembered him from her childhood, a quiet, watchful presence. He had always been a man of few words, but those words often carried an unspoken weight. She knew instinctively that he saw more than he let on. Chapter 3. The First Scratch. The imposing gray manor felt colder now, filled with the echoing silence of Arthur's absence. While sorting through his meticulously organized, yet strangely impersonal belongings, Elara found the first inconsistency. It was tucked away in a false bottom of an antique sea chest, beneath a stack of old shipping manifests. A small, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with neat, precise script, detailing offshore accounts and investments that far exceeded Arthur's publicly declared assets. It was a financial landscape she knew nothing about, a labyrinth of numbers that hinted at vast, undisclosed wealth. Then, at the very bottom of the chest, beneath the ledger, was a single faded photograph. It depicted a small, sturdy fishing trawler, its name, the Obsidian, clearly visible on the bow. A harsh, angry X had been scrawled across the image in dark ink, defacing the vessel as if in an act of deliberate erasure. The image was old, the colors muted by time, but Elara felt a prickle of unease. Why would her father keep such a thing, and why would he deface it so vehemently? The next day, she met Vivian Bell at Maritime Holdings. Vivian, Arthur's sharp-edged former business partner, a woman whose ambition was as palpable as the salt in the air, greeted Elara with an overly solicitous smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Vivian, in her sleek, dark suit, was all efficiency and brisk professionalism. She spoke of Arthur's immense loss to the island, but her focus quickly shifted to financial matters, insisting Elara finalize Arthur's will quickly, citing ongoing business concerns. Arthur worked tirelessly for this island, Elara, Vivian stated, her voice tight, and his legacy must be protected. We need to tie up loose ends swiftly. I found something, Elara began, holding up the crumpled photograph of the Obsidian. Do you know anything about this trawler? It was among Father's things. Vivian, who moments before had been a whirlwind of controlled composure, froze. Her smile vanished, replaced by a mask of studied indifference. The Obsidian? She repeated, her voice a shade too casual. Oh, that old thing. An old failed investment, years ago. Nothing important. Arthur had many ventures. Some didn't pan out. Best to just discard it. She waved a dismissive hand. But Elara saw the flicker in Vivian's eyes, a lightning-quick emotion. Surprise? Fear? Before it was expertly hidden. The encounter solidified Elara's burgeoning suspicion. Arthur's revered legacy, the one she had tried so hard to believe in, was built on a foundation of deceit, and the Obsidian was a crucial, unspoken part of it. Chapter 4. Echoes in the Mist. The ledger and the faded photograph of the Obsidian became Elara's reluctant compass. She spent days poring over Arthur's old files, cross-referencing dates, searching for any mention of the trawler or the offshore accounts. The numbers in the ledger were meticulous, almost obsessive, detailing transactions that dated back roughly 20 years, precisely the period when Arthur's fortunes had taken a dramatic, unexplained leap. Her investigation led her to the island's whispers, the half-formed legends woven into the very fabric of Greyhaven. There was one person who might hold the threads of those forgotten tales, Old Man Hemlock. He was a reclusive figure, a wizened hermit who maintained the lighthouse grounds, his face a landscape of deep-set wrinkles and sun-weathered skin. Islanders said Hemlock remembered every stone on the island, every tide, every lost soul the sea had claimed. His small cottage, perched precariously on a lower cliff, was a jumble of driftwood, fishing nets, and ancient charts, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and the sea. Elara found him pruning thorny rose bushes that somehow thrived in the harsh coastal wind. He didn't look up as she approached, his gnarled hands moving with deliberate slowness. "Mr. Hemlock?" she began, her voice feeling too loud in the quiet air. He paused, finally turning his head. His eyes, the color of the sea on a stormy day, regarded her with unnerving intensity. "The Vance girl," he rasped, his voice like rustling dry leaves. "Like your father, always asking questions. But you you look for different answers. Chapter 5, The Obsidian's Shadow. Elara cut straight to it. I'm looking for information about a fishing trawler, the Obsidian. She held out the photograph. Hamlock took the photograph, his thumb brushing over the X. A shadow, deep and old, crossed his face. The Obsidian, he repeated, the name a sigh. Belonged to the Dwyer family, salt of the earth they were, lived right on the prime waterfront down by the old docks. Arthur Vance, your father, he wanted that land something fierce. He settled onto a weathered bench, gesturing for Elara to sit beside him. The air grew heavy with unspoken history. The Dwyers, they wouldn't sell. Their family had fished those waters for generations. Then, 20 years ago, a storm. A bad one, they said. The Obsidian went out, never came back. Dwyer patriarch, lost at sea. No trace. Hamlock's gaze drifted to the distant horizon. After that, Arthur's luck turned. The land was suddenly his, through some legal loophole, what with no heir to press the claim properly. And with that waterfront, he secured the crucial port licenses, built maritime holdings. Everyone said it was a miracle, a blessing for the island. He paused, a wry twist to his lips. But the whispers, they started quiet, then grew. That the storm was merely a cover, a convenient shroud for something far darker. Elara's breath hitched. 20 years ago, the exact time the ledger began to swell, the pieces were starting to fit, forming a picture far more sinister than she had imagined. Chapter 6, The Poisoned Waters. Driven by Hemlock's revelations, Elara dug deeper into the Dwyer family. She found old land records, newspaper clippings, and even older islanders willing to speak in hushed tones now that Arthur Vance was no longer a living presence. The Dwyers had been fiercely resistant to selling their prime waterfront property, a stubbornness that had reportedly infuriated Arthur. The true breakthrough came in a dusty box of archived maritime holdings records, among obscure environmental impact assessments from 2 decades prior. Hidden within pages of bureaucratic jargon, Elara found it. Evidence that the captain of the Obsidian had been collecting documentation. Documentation proving Arthur Vance was illegally dumping toxic waste near Greyhaven's prime fishing grounds. Waste that would have poisoned the very industry he claimed to be saving and ruined him. The weight of the truth pressed down on Elara, hot and suffocating. Her father wasn't just a controlling figure. He was a ruthless operator, willing to destroy lives and livelihoods for profit. The secret she had buried, her own intuition that her father was capable of ruthlessness, a cold ambition that chilled her to the bone, was violently resurfacing. It was worse than she could have imagined. Her father was not merely selfish, he was a murderer. Chapter 7, Daniel's Plea. Her childhood friend Daniel found her in the old lighthouse, staring out at the turbulent sea, the damning documents clutched tight in her hand. Daniel, a fisherman himself, had a face weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes held a softness that distinguished him from most island men. They had shared secrets as children, explored every hidden cove, dreamed of escape. Now, their past seemed a world away. "You need to stop, Elara," he said, his voice urgent, his gaze sweeping over the papers. "What is it you found?" She explained, the words tumbling out, raw and bitter. The Dwyer family, the Obsidian, the toxic waste, the fraudulent land deal, the unspoken truth of Arthur's rise. Daniel listened, his face growing paler with each revelation. When she finished, he ran a hand through his sandy hair, his shoulder slumped. "Elara, you can't expose this. Think of the island. Arthur built everything here. Maritime Holdings employs half the families. If this comes out, if his legacy is shattered, the whole economy will collapse. People will lose their homes, their livelihoods. It'll destroy Greyhaven. He stepped closer, his hand gripping her arm, pleading. The past should stay buried, Elara, for the sake of the living, for the sake of us. His eyes, usually so clear, were clouded with fear, not for himself, but for the fragile community. Elara pulled away, her own conflict warring within her. The truth tasted like ash, but the thought of burying it again, of allowing her father's monstrous deception to perpetuate, felt like a betrayal of a different chapter. Chapter 8, The Price of Lies. The ledger's meticulous entries, now understood, pointed to a single, final destination, an old, disused maritime storage unit tucked away amongst crumbling shacks near the cliffs, long forgotten by everyone but Arthur. It was a relic from the island's past, a place where fishermen once stored their surplus gear before the modern docks were built. Armed with the information from the ledger, Elara found the unit. The lock was rusted, but after a few determined blows with a heavy rock, it gave way. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of salt and decay. Stacked neatly in a waterproof trunk, amidst other forgotten relics, were the original, damning documents concerning the Dwyer family's disappearance. There were copies of falsified permits, altered land deeds, and, most horrifyingly, Captain Dwyer's original logbook. Arthur had meticulously annotated it, adding fabricated entries that painted Dwyer as incompetent, reckless, negligent, creating a narrative that ensured the disappearance of the Obsidian was officially dismissed as an accident, securing Arthur the land through legal loopholes and intimidation. The toxic waste manifests were there too, alongside evidence of payoffs made to local officials who could have intervened. The truth was far worse than she had imagined. Her father was not just selfish, not just complicit. He had orchestrated a murder, or at the least manslaughter for profit, covering his tracks with a web of lies so intricate and pervasive they had become the very bedrock of Greyhaven. His empire, his philanthropic image, was built on the drowned bodies of the Dwyer family. Chapter 9, The Sheriff's Burden. Elara found Sheriff Thorne in his small, cluttered office, the weight of the island's history tangible in the dim light. She laid the documents on his desk, the ledger, the original Dwyer logbook, the waste manifests, the falsified permits. Thorne picked up Captain Dwyer's log, his fingers tracing the forged entries. His face, usually a stoic mask, sagged under the revelation. He closed his eyes, a deep, shuddering breath escaping him. "I was a young deputy then," he confessed, his voice rough with years of suppressed guilt. "Saw it, or parts of it. Arthur Vance, he had a way of twisting things, of making people see what he wanted them to see. I tried to push, but my hands were tied. He had already bribed higher-ups on the mainland, secured his influence. The official report came down, tidy and neat. Accident. Case closed." He looked at Elara, his eyes raw. "I couldn't prove it then, not without losing everything myself, and no one would have believed a junior deputy over the great Arthur Vance." Then Thorne delivered the final, horrifying detail. "Your father's death, Elara, it wasn't entirely accidental." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'd been quietly reactivating the old Dwyer case. Little things, small inquiries, enough to make him nervous. I never suspected he kept anything so damning." He gestured to the papers. "Arthur, paranoid and cornered, went to the cliffs that night to dispose of that final ledger, those documents you found. He must have known I was close." Thorne's gaze hardened. He didn't slip, Elara, not in the way they said. He was facing the absolute ruin of his legacy. Someone else may have been there, Vivian Bell, perhaps. She was trying to buy the silence of the last witness, a contact I had. Arthur, in that moment of panic or confrontation, stumbled or was pushed. The squall, the cliff, it was the perfect stage for his own dark truth to finally claim him. The pieces clicked into place. Vivian's frantic need to finalize the will, her fierce protectiveness of Arthur's reputation, her knowledge of the Obsidian. She had been trying to clean up her own involvement, perhaps, or secure her future before the whole edifice crumbled. Arthur Vance, the architect of so many lies, had ultimately been consumed by them at the very edge of the island he had supposedly saved. Chapter 10. The Unveiling. Elara stood on the cliff path now, the wind whipping her hair, the old lighthouse a stark sentinel behind her. The sea crashed below, a relentless rhythm of truth and consequence. Her father had built an empire on blood and lies, and she could not, would not let the myth of Arthur Vance persist. The comfort of a beloved father's memory was now a shroud she could not bear. She used the documents, the ledger, the logs, the testimonies to expose the full story of the Deepwater scandal and the fraudulent land deal. The local newspaper, usually a meek recorder of island life, ran the story on its front page, its headlines screaming. The regional papers picked it up, then national news. The revered image of Arthur Vance shattered, splintering into 1,000 dark shards. Greyhaven reeled. The revelations were a tsunami, devastating the quiet rhythm of island life. There was outrage, grief, disbelief, and a profound sense of betrayal. The foundation of maritime holdings, once seen as the island's salvation, was now revealed as a monument to avarice and murder. The economic uncertainty loomed large, a terrifying abyss. Daniel's fears echoed in the angry murmurs of the villagers who had lost faith or now faced ruin. But Elara refused to let the destruction be complete. Her inheritance, the vast fortune accumulated through her father's crimes, became her instrument of penance. She established a restitution fund, a trust managed by independent parties, dedicated to the families Arthur had ruined, not only the Dwyers, but others who had been subtly coerced, pushed aside, or exploited in his ruthless climb. It was a painful, bitter act, but a necessary one, a cleansing. Chapter 11. Epilogue. A New Horizon. The Grey Manor, once Arthur's imposing fortress, was sold. Elara kept only a few personal mementos, photographs that depicted a father she had thought she knew before the truth had ripped away the veil. She left Greyhaven in the autumn, the mist thicker now, the air colder. The island was irrevocably changed, scarred, but also, perhaps, beginning a slow, arduous journey toward a more honest future. Her act had brought hardship, yes, but it had also brought a raw, painful reckoning that Greyhaven desperately needed. The myth was dead, and in its place, a fragile hope for justice had been born. Elara carried the weight of the truth with her, a heavier, more profound burden than the regrets of distance she'd once nursed. But it was an honest weight, a foundation built not on lies, but on the hard, unyielding bedrock of reality. She had exchanged the comfort of a beloved father's memory for the painful clarity of his true nature. As the ferry pulled away, the lighthouse, once a symbol of her father's power, faded into the mist. It was no longer a beacon of his lies, but merely a silent witness to the gray, tempestuous truths of Greyhaven Isle. Her own horizon, once clouded by filial piety, was now clear, stark, and utterly her own.